What is up? Not a Grom fam! We've got an install video today for the 2018 to 2020 Kawasaki Ninja 400, and we're going to be installing the high flow air filter, a high flow air filter which you can now get from www.helequip.com. That's my website. Be listed under the MMW high flow air filter for the Kawasaki Ninja 400, and we're also going to be installing the Driven Racing emissions block off plate. Now this removes your basic emissions system from the intake side of your engine. So I'll be showing you how to tear the bike apart and install these parts. I will say there is one note when you buy the Driven Racing block off plate. It does not come with the little sensor eliminator for the emissions, so you will get a check engine light if you're not planning on using a standalone ECU like I have on my bike. However, if you purchase the TST version, it does come with that little connector, that little delete thing, so you won't have a check engine light. I didn't know that at the time, but so we're just going to be avoiding that. I actually installed a standalone ECU not long after this, so that's not really a problem for me anyway. But I might actually be making those little connectors in the future. I'm researching that, so if I do end up getting those released and get them on the website, I will update the description down below and put a link there so that you can go there and buy one if you do end up getting the Driven Racing block off plate instead of the TST one, which is a little bit more expensive. Alright, let's get started. Of course, get started by removing the rear seat and then of course the front seat. Then you want to take this Allen bolt out of the side over here, which is typically hidden underneath the seat. Then remove the Allen bolt up close to the handlebars and the front of the fuel tank. Now with those two Allen bolts removed, you can gently just pry this little plastic panel off of the side of the bike. Up next, you want to go over to the other side, and you're going to do pretty much the exact same thing. You've got this one bolt that's at the rear of the tank. And then you have that same bolt near the handlebars towards the front of the tank. And of course, just like the other side, you can just gently pry off this one plastic panel. Next, you want to take these Allen bolts out that attach the plastics to the front side of the tank. You do have one of these on each side. And while you're over here, you can go ahead and take off this this fuel vacuum hose. There is another one right next to it, but you can take it off later. Now, of course, you move to the other side and take off the one on the exact opposite side. Now we want to go ahead and pry the clip off of the fuel line and remove the fuel line. Now you want to move to these two 10mm bolts on the back of the fuel tank. You can just loosen those up with a ratchet and then turn them out the rest of the way with your fingers. It's a lot easier and faster that way. Then you want to pry this little piece out. Now you can lift the rear of the tank up, which gives you access to the fuel pump plug. Just go ahead and remove that plug. And then you can move to the front of the tank and kind of wiggle it loose to where you can get to that other vacuum hose. Then you can remove that vacuum hose and remove the tank from the bike. Up next is the air box, and this is the air box here. This is what we're going to be removing next. Start out by removing these two breather hoses. They are side by side. Then you can move on to the connector in the back. It's just a little 2-prong electrical connector. And remove the clamps that hold the airbox onto the throttle bodies. You have one of these on each side as well. Up next, you've got one single 10mm bolt at the very top. Just loosen that up and pull the bolt completely out. Now you can give the airbox a little wiggle, get it off of the throttle bodies, and you'll have access to another breather hose that's attached to the bottom of the airbox. Just reach in there, disconnect that, and you can remove the airbox from the bike completely. Now we've gained access to the emission system, and that little block right there is where we're going to put our block off plate. We start off by removing this hose right here. Then we want to remove this clip for this wire here. This is where that little delete thing would normally go, but since we don't have that, we're just going to zip tie this up here out of the way. Again, the check engine light doesn't matter to me. I ended up going with a standalone ECU anyways, and so it's not an issue. Now we want to go ahead and remove this little plate here. On the inside of this thing, there are two little, well, it's a single piece, a little steel pair of flutes. We want to remove those flutes from the bottom of this plate. You can see the bottom of the flutes there. And now that we've got the flutes removed, you can just set them down in there exactly the way they came out. And then you can place the Driven Racing block-off plate on top of the flutes. Up next, take the bolts that you took out, put a little red Loctite on them, and turn them into the block-off plate by hand until they're tight. I wasn't able to find any torque specifications for these two particular bolts, so just take your 8mm socket and just snug them up to about as tight as you think they were when you took them off. Alright, and that's it. The block-off plate is installed. Now we can move over to the air filter and install this little plug. Now this goes over that one breather hose that we took off in the beginning. That was part of the emission system, so we no longer need that, so we're just going to plug this with this little block off that was included with the Driven Racing plate. Now we want to take the air filter out, which means taking out all of these Phillips screws. I recommend using a drill. Doing this with a screwdriver took a very, very long time. But once you've got all of those taken out, then you can go ahead and remove the top cover, revealing the factory air filter. And you've got one screw holding the factory air filter in place. And you might have to pry it out a little bit. I just used a flathead screwdriver here, and then it just pops right out. As you can see, the factory air filter is made out of a thin paper material. Now we've got the high flow air filter, which is made more out of a kind of what you would see on an automotive air filter. This is comparable to the K&N air filters. It's a mesh material with a steel mesh screen covering it on both sides. Just plop it down, it fits in the factory hole perfectly, nothing to trim, nothing to do. Use the factory screw to screw it back in place, and then you can put your cover back on and reinstall all of your screws. Once you've got all your screws in place, you can just reassemble the bike exactly the same way you took it apart. That's pretty much it for today's video. Again, if you want to pick up one of these high flow air filters, you can head over to www.heliquip.com. But as always, that's it for this video. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. And we will see you next time. Peace.